Okay, thank you very much. And okay, we're now, so we're streaming, and Michael has asked us to use the microphone. So I'm going to introduce Ron, who's going to give us our first reflection.
Hi. So when we think of global warming, we no doubt think of automobiles, airlines, energy derived from fossil fuels, and we want public policy to address these things. But when we think of things that we as individuals can do, we probably think of hybrid and electric vehicles, reducing unnecessary air travel, having a green audit of our homes and businesses. These are all good ideas, and green audits of our schools and churches would be good ideas too. I mean, just imagine a carbon neutral archdiocese. For that matter, imagine a church that is 1/6 of the planet's population, 1/5 of the United States, having a synod, and that synod commits said church to carbon neutrality and care of the earth. But I wonder how many people think of what we eat and how this affects the climate, the planet, and the health and happiness of billions. Food production accounts for 1/3 of all planet heating gases emitted by human activity. And meat production specifically causes twice the pollution of plant-based food production. It takes 11 times more fossil fuel to produce a calorie of animal protein than a calorie of grain protein. Farming equipment, the spraying of fertilizers, and transportation of food release 17.3 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases each year. That's 35% of all global emissions, twice the entire emissions of the United States. Beef alone accounts for 1/4 of the world's food-related emissions. 2.5 kilograms of greenhouse gases are emitted for every kilogram of wheat, while 70 kilograms of greenhouse gases are emitted for a single kilogram of beef. Brazil, if you're wondering, is the world's #1 beef producer, and South America is the region with the highest rate of animal-based food emissions, followed by South and Southeast Asia, then China. As China and India are becoming wealthier, the young are adopting more American, European eating habits, and the consequences are devastating. Most of the world's cropland is used to feed livestock, not people. To grow feed for livestock, forests, including and most alarmingly, the rainforests, are felled, a process that ultimately leads to desertification. It should also be noted that livestock produce vast quantities of methane, a gas that is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. By the end of this century, and you'll see the irony, 1/3 of the world's food production will be lost because of global warming. There are considerations beyond the survival of our own species. We must consider the appalling and unnecessary suffering of billions of animals to produce food that really isn't very good for us. Unfortunately, I haven't the time to go through all the evils suffered on factory farms, but you might want to take a look at PETA's website to learn more. These ethical considerations present an opportunity for interfaith dialogue. The Buddhists, for example, highly commend the practice of vegetarianism. The late pacifist and Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh said, "By eating meat, we share the responsibility of climate change, the destruction of our forests, and the poisoning of our air and water. The simple act of becoming a vegetarian," he said, "will make a difference in the health of our planet." Amen to that. Sadly, our Christian tradition says very little about dietary ethics and animal and planetary suffering. Traditionally, our monastics have adopted a vegetarian diet as a form of penance. Now, maybe one doesn't feel ready for vegetarianism. But perhaps you can consider this discipline for the remainder of Lent, or maybe return to the observance of meatless Fridays. Even small reductions help. And perhaps we can begin to see abstinence from meat, whether long-term or periodic, no longer as a penance, but as a celebration of life and a sign of the resurrection and the coming of the peaceable kingdom, of which the prophet Isaiah says, "The wolf shall lie with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the young goat. A little child shall lead them. The cow and the bear shall graze, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord." For our second reflection, Barbara Deck will guide us in asking for the grace to look closely to see how our life choices affect creation and the poor and vulnerable.
Thank you, Ron. And again, I am Barbara Deck. I'm going to talk about fast fashion, and the question I'm asking myself is, how can I turn away from a throwaway culture and instead stand in solidarity with creation and with the poor? This is my story. During the pandemic and before, I was buying clothes from stores like Marshall's, or more frequently online. It seemed so convenient and such a good deal. But in part from reading the bulletin, in part preparing for this discussion, I have become aware of fast fashion as an ethical purchasing choice. What exactly is fast fashion? It is the production of very inexpensive clothing, often in the global south, in countries such as India, China, and Indonesia, to meet the demands of quickly changing trends. It is called fast because the clothing goes very quickly from international fashion shows or social media to global south factories to online companies to our doors. It's also fast in that it is made to be purchased, barely worn, and then thrown away. Clothes are being kept for an ever-decreasing amount of time. Fashion trends are becoming shorter-lived as fashion companies continually produce new designs and styles to keep people consuming. In the fast fashion world, there's 52 fashion seasons, one for each week, due to the impact of social media and influencers. What is the economic scope? It's huge. The profit motive fuels the fast fashion industry, which has an estimated annual value of $3 trillion. The industry produces 80 billion pieces of clothing each year. Women in the global north, that's us, buy twice as many clothes as they did just 15 years ago. But who really pays for these clothes? The price of clothing has fallen dramatically in the global north. A whole generation of shoppers expects to be able to buy everything much more cheaply, but these low prices are possible only because of the slavery and exploitation that exist in the fashion industry's supply chain. The price of the clothing does not reflect the true cost to the farmers, spinners and weavers, tailors, finishers, quality control teams, and packers. Who are the workers? Usually females. Production typically involves low wages and poor working conditions. Only 2% of garment workers make a living wage. I looked it up, and since 2006, more than 500 Bangladeshi workers have died in fires in factories where clothes are produced for Walmart, H&M, and Target, among others. The worst so far was in 2012 when 123 workers, again primarily women, perished in a 9-story inferno of a factory with locks on the doors. This is certainly the cry of the poor. What about the cry of the earth? I was shocked to discover that the fashion industry is the second most polluting industry in the world after oil. It produces more greenhouse emissions than international flights and shipping combined. It is one of the largest consumers of fresh water on the planet. It produced 92 million tons of waste in 2015 alone. Most of the clothes that we buy are polyester-based. I looked it up. Polyester is a synthetic fiber derived from coal, air, water, and petroleum. From being washed or discarded or in the process of production, they are responsible for an estimated 35% of all microplastics found in the ocean. 35% of all microplastics come from fast fashion. The distance a cotton t-shirt, I thought, okay, well, it's just a cotton t-shirt, that's good. The distance a cotton t-shirt has to travel from a cotton farm to our door is 16,500 miles. On average, we wear a piece of clothing only 7 times before it's disposed of. 20% of our closets are worn 80% of the time. I wear almost every day black pants and a black shirt. Here I am. Okay, but my closet is full of other things. We buy more and more, and we have an earth smothered in trash. Pope Francis calls this the filthification of the world. Call for conversion. Our culture is telling us we need more and more and that we need new things. We've created an economic system that's built on disposability and excess buying. We need to think differently. Let's start. Do you know where your clothes come from? The clothes that you're wearing today? Your jacket, scarf, your shoes, your handbag, or knapsack? Where was it made? So in preparing this, I looked at my LL Bean jacket. Maine, right? No, Bangladesh. Who made it? Have the people who've worked to produce it been treated with dignity? Been given a living wage, decent working conditions? Is oil a raw material for polyester? Yes. Where did the water used to process the polyester and the dyes go? What did it contaminate or destroy? What about the supply chain? How much jet fuel did it take to get to the US and the fuel to transport it further? Oscar Romero has told us to aspire not to have more, but to be more. Be more for our earth and for the poor. Purchasing is always a moral and simply an economic act. What can we do? I have a friend who decided to buy no clothes for an entire year, and she stuck to it. We could shop less, wear clothes longer, buy secondhand, give away and do not restock, shop in your closet. We can support and join together. We join together and support each other in understanding, talking about, and changing the whole industry through our choices. Thank you. I hope after this talk that clothes buying will never look the same again. And we can continue the conversation about what we can do after we finish our presentations. So I would like to introduce our next presenter, Strad Engler.
I will be guiding us in asking for the grace of conversion as we seek ecological justice and reconciliation. So far, we have asked for the grace to see creation from God's perspective and to see how our choices affect the poor and the vulnerable as they affect our common home. Now we ask for the grace of conversion as we seek ecological justice and reconciliation. We ask ourselves, where have I fallen short in caring for creation and my brothers and sisters? How do I ask for a conversion of heart? Falling short implies an intentional act. I know this is how it should be, but I'm just not making the effort to do it right. Sometimes, though, falling short isn't an act we choose. It's what we don't do. Or in the case of things we buy, it's what we don't know. For example, what is the work like for the people who make the things we made? Is it safe? Is it well rewarded? Barbara gave us a nice list of questions for that. For me, the what I don't know applies to my love for chocolate. I was in the Peace Corps in the 1970s, and while I was there, I never knew about the child labor that was involved in making cocoa. Ghana is one of the world's largest cocoa producers. It's only recently that I've learned the risk to children. The physical dangers come from handling razor-sharp machetes, carrying heavy loads, and using agricultural chemicals without protective gear. In addition, working children may not be able to attend school. As I looked into this more closely, I discovered two forces at work: local efforts to directly support cocoa farmers and their families, and international efforts to change the cocoa market. Local efforts revealed the importance of Pope Francis' call to hear the voices of those most affected, in this case, the indigenous cocoa farmers. Not surprisingly, when farmers receive aid, training, and living wage prices for their crops, children are less at risk and go to school. The good news is that even with increased cocoa production, there is progress. Efforts work with agencies, cooperate closely with farmers, and listen to their stories. Today, a higher percentage of children are in school. While the overall use of child labor has increased, the use of child labor has remained stable in targeted areas. So if you try to do something, it can actually make a difference. The bad news is that exposure to agricultural chemicals has increased. The global market for cocoa is like any commodity. Prices fluctuate and farmers face unpredictable returns. Recently, Ghana has been promoting fair trade practices to draw a higher price. Ironically, the amount of cocoa grown with fair trade practices are larger than the market demand. The good news is that chocolate lovers can make a difference. As a result of a recent campaign, over 40,000 people lobbied Godiva Chocolate, convincing the company to issue a new policy for responsibly sourcing its cocoa. The group behind the campaign is Green America. This nonprofit organization works to harness the strength of consumers and the marketplace to create a socially just and environmentally sustainable society. One of their resources is a chocolate scorecard. Conversion requires two things. First, a commitment. I want to do this. The second, installation. I will make this a habit. My journey as I explored the story of cocoa farmers led me to a commitment to be more conscious of the source of the cocoa beans that go into my chocolate treats. I also learned how interconnected the cocoa farming story is. The safety and education of children, the importance of a basic living wage for commodity farming, the importance of empowering the farmers, especially the women, the effect cocoa farming has on the environment, and the relationship between market prices, commercial producers, and our buying habits. As Pope Francis says, it's all interconnected. But for this commitment and awareness to stick, I have to do something to make it a habit. I learned from the Green America campaign that the voice of 40,000 people working together can make a difference. To help make my commitment a habit, I became a member of Green America. More importantly, I am promising to participate in their campaigns to amplify my economic power by joining with others working to build a socially just and environmentally sustainable society. Or, as the Laudato Si pledge says, to pray for and with creation, live more simply, and advocate to protect our common home. This ends the formal presentations for our program today. Now it's a time for us to take what we've heard and ask for the grace to reconcile our relationship with God, creation, and humanity. How can we, as a parish of St. Ignatius, repair our relationship with creation, and make choices consistent with our desire for reconciliation with creation. Barbara will lead us in the small group discussion.
Okay, so should we have two
Yes. And there's this,
Okay, so this is a very important part of what we're doing. We want your thoughts and feedback, some brainstorming, please. So I would very much like 3 people to go sit at that table over there, and 3 people to sit at that table over there. And we have some questions. We're going to have them on pieces of paper that we will give to you. So why don't you go sit at the tables first, and then I'll tell you how we will proceed.
to address the people on live stream.
Hi, live stream people. Michael is going to be leading you in doing this same exercise. Instead of us writing down your responses on newsprint, you will be writing them in chat. Okay, yep, and these are, okay, so green team members, can you go sit at one at each table? And these are the questions, and Michael will take you through them one by one if you're on live stream. Otherwise, we're going to do it at the tables. We'll do 4. Each question will have 4 minutes, and during that time, we should have time for everybody to give us some ideas. I'm just going to read them once, but you will have them presented one by one. What have you heard today that inspires you or surprised you? What can we do individually and as a community to ensure our choices lead to reconciliation with creation and sustainability? The third question is how to break this work into smaller pieces so we're not overwhelmed. And the fourth question is, what does it mean to be a Laudato Si parish? Look at the global picture. Don't leave anyone out. What can we do together? Okay, after we've had time to go around and get some ideas, we will have a report from each one of the tables.
Should I start? Yeah. So, we have 4 minutes, and the idea is for each of us to go around and give an answer, and then at the end, to give like one big idea that we might So if you could bring up your sheet for the closing report, and then Ann will give us our final closing prayer and dismissal for coffee and donuts for anybody who's still in here. Yeah, come up here to the podium.
Joe, do you want to go first? Or do you want to go first? Thanks. Well, did someone else want to speak? I don't want to. Who's there? I'm not sure. This is busy.
That's all right.
All right. Okay. So anyway, thank you, group, for really excellent thinking together. We had lots of good ideas. Here are the ones we thought that we wanted to share. One is breaking it down into. Breaking this down into smaller pieces, and there was a suggestion starting with meatless Fridays, or reducing the quantities of meat, and that's number one. Number two is creating spaces where we can share support of decision making. It's not so easy, but if you know that somebody else cares about what you're doing about meat, or somebody else cares about what you're doing about clothing purchases, and Strad suggested an advocacy team could pick something like the chocolate issue and have a push for a letter maybe every month, and then it would be easy for people to support that. Another one is to see environmental issues as core to Catholic social justice mission and teach it in faith formation. So I think both with Boston College students and also in the younger people who are in faith formation. And last thing is to create a fellowship where we can have a chance to talk to each other and build our relationships. I'll hold it. I can hold the microphone now.
So a few of the items we discussed, number one is because purchasing power is such a strong impetus in our consumer society, we had to think that we need to have greater consumer education so people have a much greater understanding of what it is they're consuming in terms of whether or not it's healthy to the environment. Is it healthy to the people who are producing this? So what are the effects of what we're buying? And then individually, to become more informed, to become more discerning, to try to be more open and to educate ourselves. And then Mara had said she finds that it's much better when you know that there's a bigger movement, there are more people involved. So being able to educate one another, but in a way that is transformative, that's not preachy, because we talked about you can't even convince people to get vaccination, or so how are you going to convince people? Do it in a way that says you might have some skin in this game, this is your planet, this is your environment, but also if we just did these small things. So we decided that it's best to provide small concrete actions and information sheets. So just say, did you know your hamburger causes this effect on labor, on the environment, or your clothing? When you talked about clothing, Ghana not only produces chocolate, Ghana is one of the biggest receivers of fabric that's sent back to the third world as waste. So they have to deal with that again. And also, if we share other people, but encourage their actions, but also just be the model, live the life, and show that, you know, this is livable, it's doable.
Okay, and Anne is going to take us home.
Lots of good ideas and good information this morning. We're concluding our examen. We give thanks for God for the gift of creation. We ask for God's help and guidance so we may care for creation and the most vulnerable among us, strengthened in our common pursuit for ecological justice. This prayer is from the Laudato Si platform. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smaller of your creations. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of the earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Thank you for being here today and live streaming. I hope you'll join us again in future pursuits, be part of our efforts to put into action the Laudato Si action plan.